Yeah, dear Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity to present our project Urban Spaces in this auditorium. Us means Anna Kure and myself and the whole team which works behind it. The project Urban Spaces in Europe, discovering regional culture and history together as a basis for a European future 2021-2023 is the project I would like to show you together with Anna now. The background of this project is a long-standing cooperation between the Opladen and the Jülich Historical Society and a lot of joint projects we did. And also the Opladen Historical Society has a long relationship to the 6 European twin towns of Leverkusen, doing bilateral activities and projects together, and also starting smaller network projects. So we really started on the grassroots with our work, and this work is all voluntary done. And our latest project, or the forerunner project, was a project which was called Ends of War in European Homelands. It was done in the 2018-2019, co-funded by the Europe for Citizens program. And this project had different outcomes, like an exhibition, publications, several workshops, and brought some of the twin towns of Leverkusen and Jülich together, and brought the idea forward to do another common project. So we had the idea of starting a project which we called Urban Spaces, and the idea was to do research and also education on a European, on a regional, and a local level. And therefore we created somehow a project landscape with local projects in the towns of Jülich and Leverkusen and all the other twin towns. We have a wider cultural program in the Rhine area. There's a bilateral program between the Rhine area and Upper Silesia. And we have 2 European projects, the overall project, which deals with the cultural spaces in the interwar period, and also the idea of creating a variable multilingual film kit. So different approaches in one project. And we had a look at the topic, and we thought the topic of this project should be the interwar period, which was quite a difficult approach because we need to find a common understanding and the idea of a common history, because we wanted to discuss European history based on a local level. This was a very interesting process. When we talk about interwar period, what is the period we are talking about? But we found out this is a very interesting period which has a lot of relevance for us nowadays, as well as a view on urban spaces. And urban spaces is not only development of towns, but also the whole cultural and economical development in an urban space. And looking at the towns participating, we see different towns which have a different level in the interwar periods, from more rural to very, very industrial towns. And we discussed how to look at this history, and we took the traditional categories of politics, society, economy, and culture, taking into account modernization and internationalization in these periods. So this is the idea we started as an object of investigation for our project. And the participating towns, as I already said, are the 6 European twin towns of Leverkusen, as well as Leverkusen and Jülich. So we will have Bracknell in the United Kingdom, Jülich in North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany, Ljubljana in Slovenia, Leverkusen, Oulu in Finland, Racibórz in Poland, Schwedt in Brandenburg in Germany, and Villeneuve-d'Ascq in France. And this project is the first approach, or the first joint approach of a cooperation of all the towns. So we are similar working like you. It's the first approach that all the European twin towns of Leverkusen working together in one project. And we are very lucky and would like to thank that we got funding for 2 aspects of this big project landscape. On the one hand, for the toolkit for adult education, the film kit, which I will explain a bit later, by Erasmus+, and the network of towns by Europe for Citizens. But we also were very active to find local and regional funding for the local and regional aspects of the project. So here, just an overview of partners for the North Rhine-Westphalian support. The state of North Rhine-Westphalia is supporting us, as well as the towns of Jülich and Leverkusen and the Landschaftsverband Rheinland. Who are the partners? We are 8 cities or 8 towns in 6 countries, and we have 15 partners working together in this project. And these are very heterogene. We have universities, we have museums, we have archives, we have twinning associations and historical societies as those who are running the project, the Obladen and the Jülich Historical Society. And we had, as a result of our first work, the idea to integrate youth right from the beginning, but therefore, about this, Anna will say a few words later on. About our work structure, as the already presented project, we have a project management and coordination, which is done from Leverkusen and Jülich. We have a regular project leaders meeting with all the partners once a month via Zoom. We have a scientific advisory board, which gives us scientific advice and ideas about our ideas. We have working groups in the participating towns who are doing the local research and the work. And we have different working groups on European level for finances, communication, documentation, the film, didactics, Europe for Citizens products, and also the youth and social media. What kind of activities do we do at the moment? We have virtual meetings via Zoom. This was very useful also because we started the project in the pandemic, and this gave us a very fast learning process, and we can now use these tools very, very well. We also have personal meetings of the working groups. We did a lot of workshops in the participating towns. We already had workshops in Ljubljana, in Jülich and Leverkusen, in Schwedt and Potsdam, in Villeneuve-d'Ascq, in Ratibor, and this year we will have workshops in Brussels and Oulu. We will produce a publication covering as a cover of the program, so there will be a content part dealing with the history of the towns in the interwar period, as well as something like lessons learned, lessons identified of the project. And of course, we do have already activities in the individual towns like exhibitions, excursions, lectures, concerts, theater productions, discussions, publication, and conferences. And we have different social media accounts, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and also a website which is done by the program. The results at the end will be on the European level a variable multilingual film kit, which is a very new idea of dealing with history. So the idea is that everyone who is dealing with adult education can make his own film about the interwar period using the sources and the films which are done by the different groups in the different towns. And you can construct history and afterwards deconstruct history, but maybe we can talk about this later. We have the website and social media. We produced a film about our project, and at the end, so we started with the film, we would like to end with a small teaser, and we will have this publication. Beside that, in the towns, we will have exhibition. There will be a very big exhibition in Jülich and Leverkusen. In September this year, we have lectures, conferences, concerts, film screenings, discussions, publications, excursions, concerts, and theater performances. And one of the theater performances will take place here in Brussels by our friends from Schwedt about a topic in the interwar period in February on our next workshop. Let's talk about the challenges. Of course, dealing with 8 towns in 6 countries, the language, the project language is a topic. We have to choose 2 languages to deal with. So we have English and German, and we do everything in these 2 languages. The coordination of the mass of partners is quite an interesting work to do. And of course, the heterogeneity of the group, of the museums, and so it is very positive on the one hand because we have different impulses, but we have also speaking different languages. not in the language case, but in the way we are dealing with. So we have to find a common way to do so. The pandemic caused quite a number of problems in the beginning, but I think we went through it. But bureaucracy, money acquisition, and of course the structure and rigidity of funding programs is really a thing which we are dealing with, especially because the flexibility is really a problem. And we heard already about the problem of that the number of participants has to go down because the costs could not be covered due to the reasons of inflation. And this ends my first part, and I give to Anna.
Thank you. I'm going to borrow your microphone. So I come in regards to how youth fits in. There are many different ways in which youth can be involved in a project. Sometimes it's unfortunately just as an afterthought. So at the end, when you basically finalize your project, you bring the youth in and they will give you an input on what you did so that you can say that the youth was involved. But that's unfortunately not very productive because the youth that you bring in at the end does not have a personal involvement in the project. The project is not meaningful to them, it's not relevant to them, they have not learned through the project and with it. So I really like the approach that the project here took when they implemented this idea that the youth should be present from the beginning. So at first, of course, the question is, where are our experiences and expertise? What should we do within the project? And the social media popped in, as of course we are more, it's something that we relate to, that we use more frequently, perhaps too frequently, but something that feels like home. And we took that upon ourselves, and of course we were recognized as a part of the project that could maybe bring something of value into the social media aspect of it. But not just independent workshops in terms of producing social media content, but also being present at other activities that were a part of the project. So here I have a few photos. The first one is a brainstorming activity in Leverkusen, which really brought us together because it was the second workshop that we did in person, and that personal aspect of youth involvement was very much the foundation for future work, because up until Ljubljana and Leverkusen, we did everything via Zoom. There was a lot of fear going on. There was this language barrier that's much more difficult to overcome if you're speaking to a square on your monitor. So when we started working together in person, that's where the ideas really started to flow. And that's where we began exchanging our own personal experiences in terms of who we are, what we want, how we perceive history, and how we, of course, also perceive Europe. Now, the following photos are all from different aspects of the workshops that we were also present at. So different lectures, then the film kit meetings as well. We gave our input to different scenarios that were being developed, our input as to what makes history interesting for us, because ultimately we want to produce a project that is, or the final product that is made by every generation and that also suits every generation. So, of course, as the youth, we might have a very different view of history. It doesn't mean it's the correct one, because in my personal opinion, there's no one version of it, but the variety always helps. And the last photo I really like because it also shows the struggle that we sometimes come face to face with. We speak different languages, as Michael also used the phrase earlier, in terms of museums, universities, archives, all dealing with history in from a different perspective. And the same goes for different generations. So the youth might sometimes be very rash, very impulsive, very determined to prove their own right way. So you have to kind of work on your patience, work on your listening skills, and the youth and the older generations, whenever they come into conflict, might actually create something positive. Because we've all been in different relationships, and we know that the best relationships are always those in which you can argue and can solve the argument. So that's something that I found very, very positive. Now, on the top of my next slide, there are some words in which, the youth group actually used to describe the project. And here I'd like to talk a bit about what we actually did. So not just put input on what was being created as the final outcome of the project, but also create our own content in the aspect of social medias. So we've managed to produce around 154, I think, different social media posts, accompanied by different stories that also show our activities. These are posts that don't only relate to the past and the interwar period, but in general on the communities from which we all come. These are posts about different initiatives that we find interesting, that are also aimed at basically connecting within Europe. These are different international days that we celebrate. These are posts about the project, about what's going on, different videos as well. There's some experimentation being done there. Of course, as the youth, we tend to have a more fun perspective of the world sometimes. So we try to portray history in an educating way, but in the form of memes, if you're familiar with that. So different funny stories and pictures that can very well illustrate something of much greater significance. We also celebrate different people that are significant either in our own small communities or in our regions. Different holidays, different festivities, different urban developments. I find it very interesting that I come from Ljubljana, which is the capital city of Slovenia. And Slovenia is actually the smallest participant within the project in terms of countries, but Ljubljana is the biggest city. So my perspective or our troubles actually come from the fact that other smaller cities, even though they're parts of bigger countries, are more difficult to examine in terms of the accessibility of material. So there has to be some improvisation done when it comes to finding information. So that, and then just the aspects of daily life, be it now or be it in the past. I'm very proud, and the youth group is also very proud on the fact that we pull through an advent calendar. So through the whole December, we posted a story or a post a day. And these were recipes. Recipes are not only interesting in terms of something that you remember from a country that you visited. However, they're also very big elements of our identities. And these are something that the members of the youth group were very passionate about. And then, of course, our traditions, maybe events that one can visit in a different town that he or she doesn't even know exists, but now may be inclined to visit. So we got to know not only other cities that participate in the project, but also our own city through doing research for such posts. And through making content like this, we of course developed our skills. Writing, editing, our language skills and communication. I must say that after the Zoom meetings were mostly over and after we began meeting in person, the language skills improved drastically. So the confidence of the members of the youth group who met face-to-face rose. And I think we, as a result, were more and more productive as well. Our research skills are skills in terms of copyright researching as well, citation, then a lot of improvisation, as I said, and then also just editing and placing different videos together to tell a story. Now, I've mentioned all of the work that we did, all of the different posts, all of the skills. And these are the words with which, consequently, the youth group relates to in terms of the project. So they would describe the project as something that connects, enables learning and enables us to learn and to educate at the same time. Of course, we all feel very privileged to be a part of it because we get to meet other people, we get to travel and experience different cultures, and thus it shapes our identities. And it also creates a point of relation, something that we may feel like we belong to. I wrote down that do we really know how Europe works in terms of the youth recognizing the work of the European Commission or the European Parliament? And I must say, even though I'm one of the oldest members of the youth group, that for the majority of the meeting earlier, I was hardly able to follow. So I really am not familiar with the structure, and neither are the youth in our respective towns and environments. However, projects such as this one might enable us to feel connected, even though we don't know the mechanics behind. Because we find kindred souls, we can relate to our personal experiences and learn from our difficulties too. And one of the interesting ways in which they also described the project was simply the word Europe. And I kind of like that. It's self-evident. Now, the next slide focuses more on our personal relationships that basically we developed, but that maybe influenced us even more than the work we did. We now have different friends all across Europe from towns that we didn't even know existed earlier. When we were talking amongst ourselves, evolved our identities because we found common ground in all of the troubles that we are experiencing, in all of the uncertainties that we are facing, all of the crises, the war, and things like that. We also see that even though we have some similar experiences, our understandings of how we live or our social backgrounds might be very different. So these are all grounds upon which we can grow in terms of understanding each other's histories, in terms of understanding that within our histories, we each have a different moment in history with which we identify more than another. So our experiences differ. We also grew to understand our school curriculum a bit more. We come from different institutions, but we also have a different background in terms of what type of education can happen around us. So that's something that we've discussed during our projects. We've learned from the older members of the group, so not the youth group, but the background workers as well, in terms of them giving us a bit of wisdom, but we also taught them quite a lot in terms of using Instagram and Be Real. And we've competed amongst ourselves, for example, with paper planes and who can throw them the longest actually. And then later on in the evening, the older generation repeated that same competition. So that's kind of a very positive influence as far as I can say. There might not be 1,000 members of the youth group, so it's not a large scale impact. There's around 30 of us, I would say. However, we, with our new understanding of what Europe is and how different cultures work, can then further on impact more people. A lot of us are educators, and the project has also influenced us in terms of giving us something that we will later on in our work use as a toolkit for our education. And all of our experiences can be translated into the experiences of other people around us, into giving them a better understanding of basically Europe. So I would argue that this has been a very relevant experience for many, many people, and a very successful way of implementing this idea that the youth should always be a part of a big project such as this one. Yes, and this has been a very nice learning experience for me as well. Yes. Next slide.
Yes, so what comes next? We would like to deepen our network on a professional level. We would like to encourage for further network in our 8 municipalities. We would like to work out lessons learned, lessons identified, which you heard already some ideas of. We would like to disseminate our project results very soon. And of course, we are interested in the marketing or expansion of the film kit as a tool for the adult education. And there are ideas for a follow-up project called History of Urban Development in the 20th century with a special focus on the post-war period. So this is what comes next. And as we started with the film, we would like to give you some ideas of our project with some minutes. Before, I would like to invite you to our workshop in Brussels from the 22nd to the 26th of February, which will take place in the House of Beer and History and in the Committee of the Regions. So film up.
Urban Spaces in the Interwar period in Europe is a network of 15 partners from 7 towns in the European Union and 1 in the United Kingdom. The organisations are museums, universities, historical and twinning associations. The period spans roughly 20 years between the end of the First World War and the outbreak of the Second World War. The partners study the concept of urban culture and how everyday life is connected with the urban development of their town. Historians, non-specialists, students and young people are involved in the project.
You know what? We had so many Zoom meetings leading up to our first workshop. It was and the anticipation was growing and growing, and we've met so many amazing people. People that were studying, people that were working in history. We got a full scope of from being interested from a youth perspective in history to actually working with archives and museums. So it was really nice actually to see everyone come together and share their experiences about history and education.
The results are disseminated through lectures, exhibitions, publications, cultural events, citizens' meetings and open cultural forums. More material will be produced, including films, excursions, plays, concerts and examples of best practice. Digital, web and social media are used, and each partner town has produced a number of video clips.
Inspired by your country, with very good feelings and memories. I hope they can take this spirit into the project, and all the others of us who will and have to prepare workshops have now the level they have to reach.
L'Europe se construit par un travail en commun, c'est-à-dire que ça n'est pas quelque chose comme ça de mythique, quelque chose qu'on ne peut pas toucher. Là, directement, on est en rapport avec des personnes et c'est ça qui est intéressant, c'est surtout la rencontre.